And I would just remind everybody, if you could please mute yourself until you are up to speak, it will help with some background noise. And there were 5 of you, so don't anyone feel bad as I'm singling them out. And Mike McDermott's now hopping in. That was Mike Farina.
Oh, sorry.
I blame you for yesterday's snow, by the way.
Great.
Teasing you.
It says he's joining, so may just take a little longer on
Yep.
his end.
All right. We're all set then. 6 o'clock. I'd like to thank everybody welcome everybody to the Tuesday, March 25th Select Board meeting. This meeting's being recorded for our Facebook
YouTube.
or YouTube. I get it right once every 3 weeks or 3 months or so. So that should do that. 6:02. Called to order. Any public comment? I don't see anything, so I'll throw it over to you.
All right, and so the first item of business, we have no items to be added to the agenda tonight. We do at 6:15 have a liquor license renewal for the Four Cuckoo Birds LLC, doing business as the Osprey. And the next item up would be the minutes of March 11th, and I do know Ari had sent along an amendment today that I incorporated, so
Okay,
they are ready to rock.
with that amendment, I move to approve those minutes.
I'll second.
All right, everybody in favor?
All right, looks like 3-0. There were no items for review in your packet. And so the next item of business would be the abatement request from Seidman Ledges LLC. And first, there's also going to be a memorandum from the code enforcement officer. The way we left this last discussion was forwarding this abatement on to be reviewed by Mike Field. And so if Mike wanted to come join us at the table and just walk us through his memorandum, give the board an opportunity for any comments, questions. After we're done with Mike's portion, we'd offer the Seidmans a chance to offer any thoughts. And then we would move to board deliberation and so on.
So good evening, thank you. So at the request of the select board, obviously, I reviewed the lots in regarding the Seidman property, Seidman Ledges property. And what I did in my memorandum is just kind of explain the review process that I do or we do for anything that's being built in Georgetown, basically. So first we look at the shoreline zoning map, and you see understanding how to read that or understand that, and then looking at the legend to see how that applies. So first, these properties have the green shading, if you will, which says it's in shoreland. And then it also has the blue hash marks, which show says that it has steep slopes of 20% or more for 2 or more contiguous acres. So then, in looking at that, I started to review the Georgetown Shoreland Ordinance to see where they're at and what could or could not be done. It's zone limited residential. And I put the definition in the memorandum. I can certainly read it, but it's basically says what you can build residential units in that area. And then I also looked at the definition of the slopes and how we handle that piece. I did put in my memo the initial setbacks for principal dwellings and accessory structures, the whole 75 feet, and area requirements and frontage requirements on a building. But then you move down to the section of the shoreline ordinance that talks about the slopes of 20% or more. And it is correct, it says in 15B 3B that no structure shall be allowed in areas of steep slopes as defined. And then there's a section below, you go further on, and it talks about what you could do as an applicant wishing to place a structure on that has the option or has the burden of proof, excuse me, to show that a proposed building site could be satisfied with us if they were able to transect 75 feet long line, if you will, through building site from the steepest elevations, the steepest rise in cliffs, if you will, or elevations, And to see if it does not, from one end to another, doesn't exceed 15 feet elevation. And but that has to be done by the applicant with a main licensed land surveyor, excuse me, or a registered main registered engineer. Just a couple of other quick things. I included the normal setbacks for lot lines, roads, etc. But I also included the non-conforming lot of record. In the non-conforming lot of record, we have exceptions that says that a non-conforming lot may be built upon without a variance and have an exception of lot area, lot width, and shore frontage. So that means if you have a non-conforming lot, not any non-conforming lot in town, you don't have, those three things do not have to be met. Just setbacks have to be met. And if those can't be, you can go to Board of Appeals. And then another piece is the contiguous vacant or partially built lots. So if you wanted to, it does talk about if you own in this case, and if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the lots are owned by the same entity. So that you have to, if you decide to build on it, you have to start thinking about merging your lot and that kind of thing.
Right.
So that you have the dimensions required by the ordinance, et cetera. And the lots also finally have to be able to hold a septic, but main wastewater management piece. The quick nutshell, I'm happy to probably answer a question if you have any.
Nope, that's pretty much when I asked my resident assessor or resident person who's been in the chair for a lot, my dad, that was the same exact, I mean, almost verbatim, the stuff that you just mentioned. I knew it was all predated, because this was done either just before the whole subdivision stuff went, because dad remembers it quite vividly. So, I mean, he just remembers that it happened. So ask him about that, and that pretty much falls exactly under what you just described. So I was glad to know that I thought. So, cool, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike, for doing that.
Any other questions for Mike? Bronwyn, did you have any?
I guess my question is, so the bottom line is that with the proper design and engineering design, you could, at least in theory, build on any of these lots, build something.
As long as you meet that piece about the 75 feet transection, the line to line, if you will, and it meets the less than 15-foot elevation from point A to point B.
Okay.
And then all the other requirements we have in our ordinance.
Told you again, you don't want to.
And we are gonna mute the audience. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting, Bronwyn.
No, I'm done. Thanks. Thank you, Mike.
Were there any other questions for Mike? If not, I would give the Seidmans a few moments to share any additional thoughts they wanted to offer before the board went into deliberations.
Yes, so, Mike, first of all, thank you very much. Our question, so obviously we're all learning about the Georgetown Shoreline Act. And I understand about, the idea that you can sort of look at, if there's a 20% slope and the town is defined with 20% slope over all of this property. At a minimum, we have the burden of proof to show that there is a possibility. So even for us to build, correct, for us to build, we have to find a 25-foot space where the slope is less than 15 feet.
75.
Sorry, 75
No,
foot wide is, yeah,
no, that's okay.
75 foot long,
Be a
15
lot
foot
less.
drop. So if we can't, so we can only build where that is. And so I guess our question is so given that the slope, and when we look at the slope, it's all steep. There's nothing, it used to be we could build in lots of places, because, and my son lives in California, it's way steeper than that, and they build it. I agree with both communities. I mean, Georgetown makes the rule. We can't we can only build where the slope is less than 20%, and we don't have that. So that would mean that we can't build on at least a significant fraction of our property. And actually, what's the remedy? Is there a remedy? I mean, maybe you're not the person to ask, but let's just say that the map was correct and that we couldn't find anywhere to build on our property. How does that work?
Well, if we deny your abatement request, then you can appeal to the Board of
No,
Appeals.
that's a different question.
Oh, okay.
Abatements are taxes. I'm saying, I'm trying to understand the restriction of the Georgetown.
I mean, that'd be like a surveyor, somebody,
No, but let's say the surveyor looked at it and he said, you're right, it's 20% everywhere. And you can't build here. To me, as I understand it, and maybe I'm thinking about it the right way. We would be required to build further back than the shoreline. So we would have to build further back. We couldn't build in that space, so we would have to build, if we wanted to build, we'd have to build further away from the shore. We couldn't build closer to the shore, obviously, because that's not gonna work.
it would all depend on the lay of the land. I mean, that's what it would boil down to, is how the stuff would fit.
Well, no, but it is, according to the map, there's
Well,
no.
the map is general. That blue thing is not a set in stone. That's just the general
Okay, sure.
area. Nobody's gone out and actually, that's from like photographic overhead stuff.
Okay.
And it's just purely a generalization of the stuff. You can have plenty of spots in there that have got less than 20%.
Not for 75 feet. though.
I'd be, well, depending on which direction you're looking at, cause I mean, I've worked around the house before and I've seen the road going in there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm granted, I'm not very familiar with it, but I know I've seen it, and just looking at the thing, I know there are certain flat areas in there. Maybe the lines of the lots are on them or something like that, so it may be a little funky like that. But there are definitely places in there where building can take place.
Well, they for sure could be built there before the Shoreline Act.
Well, I'm not even that 20%, these are all predated lots anyway,
No,
so
no,
you've
but-
got stuff
but-
around them. They're all lots of record.
No, I agree, but
So-
didn't you say, just correct me if I'm wrong, even if it's a lot of record, if there's if all of the property is more than a 20% slope, I can't build it.
Well, if you can find a spot that's got
Yeah, I mean,
75
think
feet, you definitely can.
No, but I said, my hypothesis, not my hypothetical was if it's all steep, then I can't build there.
If it's all steep,
Yeah,
but
So,
if it's the side of a mountain.
pardon?
But you
Yeah.
have options because you own contiguous lots. So
Right.
but we're not here to figure out whether you can build a house. We're just here to try and assess whether or not the assessment was fairly delivered. And
If the fair assessment is based on the value of the property, if I can't build on that space, but I have to build, as you said, if I have to, let's just say I have to build 300 feet from the shore. Clearly, the value of that very steep land is not the same as the assessed value that I would have if it was flat and I could build anywhere.
I hear your argument.
And I guess what I'd say, Mr. Seidman, is that as Aria had pointed out, should the board decide to deny these abatements based on the evidence that they have before them tonight,
Okay.
you could appeal to Saginaw County, and the Board of Assessment Review would then come down. The Saginaw County Commissioners have set up a process where it's not the commissioners handling the abatements. They have a more professionalized group that would handle that. And they could make a determination one way or the other on the abatement. But let's say they deny that as well, and over the course of the next year, you did employ a surveyor and it was fully determined with more evidence that these are unbuildable lots. You could file for another abatement, and I think that evidence would go a little bit further in this process.
So we're having a little trouble with that method because the state law says that you're supposed to make the assessment based on what I can do, what I'm permitted to do right now. And right now, the rule says you are not permitted to build there until you show otherwise, until you show, I have the burden of proof to show that there's not a 20% grade. And we're saying we can see, we don't think that there's I don't particularly want to go and hire a surveyor to prove it, but I don't think there's a 75-foot stretch where there's a 20%, less than 20% grade.
But with all due respect, Mr. Simon, none of us knows. None of us here is a surveyor. He's probably the closest and he's probably the next closest. So I think that's a speculative remark for any of us to make. I understand I have a sense of the topography. But that is an expense that, you know, that the owner would have to bear, and, if you can't build there, then there are other avenues to pursue if the surveyor, if you employ a surveyor and they tell you that. But we simply
No,
don't
but
know
I
that.
just think that in your assessment, you have to figure out how much of a restriction is this 20% slope going to have on where we can put the house? And for sure, there's some restriction.
Okay,
because
I'd like
all
to
rules-
speak.
Yeah.
Thank you. The town of Georgetown employs a professional assessor. He is highly respected in the state. He has worked in Georgetown and many other towns for a period of decades. I took a course when I first joined the select board offered by the Maine Municipal Association for people who had to make these kinds of decisions, who were dealing with assessing but were not professional assessors. Our assessor taught that course. This is his assessment. And I appreciate your persistence and your reading the law and your desire for an abatement. But I'm going to tell you up front that having looked at all the things there are I can look at, having listened to our code enforcement officer make his presentation, I will trust the surveyor. And he has surveyed all the other property in Georgetown. And the upgrade that was done this past year was a statistical upgrade. It was not a site visitation upgrade for a number of reasons. For one, the line is long of towns needing that service because of the recent chaotic aspect of the real estate market. But I guess my point here is that it is about fairness across the town of Georgetown. It is really not about the specifics of every single lot. That isn't something that we as a select board have reviewed. We review comparable properties when we can. We looked at what appeared to be comparable properties in terms of neighborhood and topography. So that's all I wanted to say.
So I guess I'd like to make one comment about comparables. So we were given a list of comparables and we looked at them. One of them is lot 23. So lot 23, so Howard's giving me a course in how you actually calculate the valuation, and it's based on, there's a factor. So, and the factor is there, we take into consideration how efficiently you can use the land. And I must confess that property 23, the factor is 25%. We were given a discount for this piece of property of 20%. So I mean, the numbers are backwards, you multiply. So ours is called 0.8 or 80%. So that means that you take the total evaluation and multiply by 80% instead of the full amount. But another property that is restricted, the factor FCTR that's on the sheet is 0.25 or 25%, and yet another where there's a restricted is 15%. So other people have restricted property and they get a significantly greater reduction in the valuation of their property. So I just want to make sure that we're all getting the same adjustment based on what's restricted. And I guess one last point. So you said that when was the last time our property was formally surveyed?
She meant assessor.
Assessed.
Assessor and assessed.
Okay, all right. Because I'm a little bit worried that we haven't been assessed since formally surveyed since the Georgetown Act, the Shoreline Act was put into effect 10 years ago. And I don't know how carefully people have looked. As you're saying, people here are saying that that the 20% is not well known one way or the other. And I just want to make sure that that's the number that has actually been measured or not measured.
For,
We did a town-wide revaluation in 2003. We did a statistical revaluation in 2007-8, and again last year.
Okay, but 2003 then was the last time that there was a formal visit.
That the
That was-
assessor went out and visited every property,
Okay,
correct?
and I say that, I asked that because the shoreline act came into effect after that, so the
No,
issue of what,
Did
no,
not, no,
when,
it did not.
the 20%.
These maps are 2013 shoreland zoning maps.
Right.
But shoreland zoning came into place,
Was the
I
20%?
wanna say 1970 something.
Yeah, it was.
But was the 20% grade indicated, because the map we're using is the 20%, is 2013.
It's a 2013 map. Those are our shoreland zoning maps.
Right, I'm guessing,
Yes.
I guess I'm asking the question wrong, was there a corresponding map before 2013, a separate map?
I'm not sure about that. I can't answer that. Right off the top of my head, I don't know. And it wouldn't matter because these ones would supersede them.
Okay, so I mean, I'm just using these maps, and I
Yes.
guess there seems apparently there's some concern that these maps aren't accurate.
in terms of historical background, during the course of the summer pickup work, would it be appropriate to flag these lots, to have someone visit just to check for slope? In the meantime, the preponderance of the evidence before us is,
He's not going to check them for slope. He's going to count on someone else to do that.
okay,
I mean,
Yeah, that's
you know,
not
you
his
can't
job.
ask him
Right,
to,
it'd be a
go to
survey.
it and, yeah,
right,
he's
so
not
it'd
gonna
be
be able
a
to. do
survey,
And
which we
unfortunately,
wouldn't
if-
survey individual homes either.
Right, and unfortunately, if we, I completely understand your point. And everybody who comes before us for an abatement request is looking for us to review their property in an individualized fashion. And as Bronwyn has pointed out, and we're all trying to say, this is a statistical, I don't think anyone's happy with it, but it has to be done in order to ensure that we aren't in a more dire financial situation here, in terms of how we would assess, because of the ratio issue that we've
State.
addressed, the state ratio. So, we're simply not able to, as much as we'd like to, review these on an individual basis. And without people taking proactive steps, like hiring a surveyor and then coming back to us, I don't know, how that could be accomplished.
Yeah, I'll just say, I guess I don't understand the purpose of the shoreline map, because apparently we don't really put any weight on the map.
Well-
We're saying that the map doesn't carry the day.
The way I look at that map is it's a guide. So I know, this is shoreland, this is resource, this is, I can do 3 towns, so I get a little confused, but it just shows all the general area of it, and then I take that, and then let's delve into the ordinance, the property, that kind of thing. So it's more, in my opinion, it's more just of a guide to know what part of the ordinance or what ordinance I need to reflect, need to refer to.
And how parts of properties are characterized,
Right,
whether it's shoreland or resource.
correct,
Other things to pay attention to when you're
right,
looking at it.
making sure
basically.
setbacks and that, those
Right.
type of things.
Were there any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I'm looking for advice. You're saying that if you had a report from a surveyor that said, we can't find a 75-foot line with a less than a 15-foot slope, that you would accept that?
I think that the evidence.
I don't know what, I don't know what you mean,
Understandable.
accept. I mean, you would have,
I'm
because we
saying-
don't decide that you have to get a permit from the planning board. If you were actually intending to build, you would have a surveyor, you would be looking for a space, you would make a design and you would take it to the planning board and they would talk to the code enforcement officer and then the permit would be given or not given. We, the select board, aren't going to give you permission to build. It's not within our job description. I'd just like to point out that we're quite a few minutes now beyond the liquor license hearing, and perhaps we could, if we've heard all the thoughts that are out there, perhaps we could have the hearing and come back to the discussion. Does that make sense, John?
Well,
I'd second that.
we could table that and or we could come back in a moment, so. That works.
If you can hold on for a little
Oh,
bit, yeah.
So So what we'll do then now,
To be here.
Yes, the public meeting.
Yeah, it's public.
until we get to executive session, then we will close the door and say thank you for coming north. And so the next item of business as we're jumping is the scheduled appointment for the liquor license renewal for Four Cuckoo Birds LLC, doing business as the Osprey. And we would just jump right into new business. I know that Zoli and Sarah are on right now, and if they wanted just to touch base, introduce, say hello. I do want to just state for the record that the main law allows that a facility that has had no complaints for 5 years and has gone through a hearing process previously, which the Osprey has, can request the waiver of a public hearing because that owner, business owner would pay the cost. So we've received a request from the Osprey to waive this, a public hearing, though we still have the discussion here. And it saves a little bit of money for the business, so for what that's worth.
I did have a complaint, which is that you're not open yet, but I don't think that's what's complicated.
enough.
by the ordinance.
Soon enough.
We're
Oh,
trying.
there we go. That's nice. Thank you.
Good for the soul.
And so really, after the Zoli and Sarah give us a quick touch base, we would then be able to move, have a motion on the floor to approve and
That's right.
get this off to folks at Bedlow.
Sure. And we, I can give a little review. We spoke with our liquor inspector this morning because we are changing our business name from Four Cuckoo Birds to Bay Point Provisions. It has gone through the state. And so all paperwork will be filed, but we confirmed with the liquor inspector that Four Cuckoo Birds should apply for it, and then we'll change the name afterwards because we are applying still. There's no change in the people that are applying for the liquor license. So you might see that come about, that our name will no longer be around town as Four Cuckoo Birds, and we are officially Bay Point Provisions. Aside from that, we are opening May 1st and anticipating a very busy season. You got anything, Zoli?
I'm excited about all the new refrigeration we've got. We are doing tons of work to the walk-ins. I got all new tables, chairs. We're redoing a bunch of the front of the building right now to make sure that it just holds up the test of time. And I'm excited to just get the gears running. We have a great front of the house staff coming back. We have a few in the back of the house. Always need a few more, but I have faith that it will work. And if not, I'll be back there cooking. So excited.
Thank you both.
I move to approve the currently DBA as Four Cuckoos liquor license renewal.
Second.
All in favor?
All right, and that looks like it's a unanimous vote. Zoli
Thanks
and
for
Sarah-
being there. Thanks for joining the fire department.
Yes, thank you.
It's my pleasure.
You're next.
I'm learning a lot. So far, I've used a shovel to shovel the house out a couple times. But
Thank you all. If you're good with us, we'll continue on with our day.
Absolutely, thank you so much.
Thanks.
take care,
And
guys.
so with that, we would actually be reverting back to assessing items to discuss the abatement request from Seidman Ledges LLC. Thank you for indulging that, so we can stick to the time.
There any more?
Something else?
Maybe I could just ask you a question, because I've heard messages. I thought I heard that if we got a surveyor's report that said that there was, that we could not build, that they couldn't find a 75-foot line that was acceptable, that we could get a different assessment. But maybe I didn't, then I heard maybe that's not the case.
What would happen at that stage, if there was evidence that showed clearly the assessments were inaccurate based on ordinance, it would then get forwarded on through the abatement process to the assessor. And he would work then with that evidence to come up with a better value, potentially a new neighborhood, all kinds of things, but we're not in that spot today. And I would say for these abatements that you still have the opportunity to appeal to the county. And at that point, they could ask for additional documentation, et cetera, as well in their process. We have yet to have had one of our abatements this year appealed to the county. So that is a process that has yet to play out with this year's taxes, but it's something that definitely would be in your rights to do so. But I think I don't want to speak for the board, but I do want to say that I don't think this board will ever carte blanche say, if we get this, then it's a promise of that. But I think stronger evidence to that effect and the claims that it's completely unbuildable would help.
I guess I would want to clarify, I don't think it's completely unbuildable. I think that we would be restrained from building near the water, we would end up building, let's say, 225 feet or 250 feet from the water, which should, in my mind, significantly reduce the value of the property. So
I
it's not
don't-
that
well-
we
That's out of my pay grade. Yeah,
I'm not sure that having waterfront and a view of waterfront and owning the land that gets to the water diminishes the value of a house that's built further back within the assessment.
we know that it
But
does because-
I'm ready to move the question if we've heard all that there is, all the things that we need to consider.
Sorry, if I move just 5 feet back past my lot, I'm in a different neighborhood and my property is assessed at 100-fold less than what it is when it's in the shoreline. So it is very clear that somewhere around 250 feet, somebody thinks that the value goes down a lot.
And from our perspective, that is the assessor who is the professional here and has given us the information and that the CEO would rely on in the past about this property. And also just as to make the point, we have to have a process which is fair across the board for these properties in that neighborhood. And that's the formula that we are trying to adhere to.
Since
Bear with me on
shoreland
that.
is not a neighborhood, it's a condition which exists in a number of neighborhoods. I'm not sure that it follows that the value of the property is reduced by being in the shoreland zone, which is essentially what I heard you say.
No, I heard
It's, yeah, the 250 feet is not about property value. It's about protecting the shorefront, protecting the body of water. So I'm confused about that, but I didn't mean to open a new line of discussion. I think we've been around in a circle already.
Yeah, I mean, I'm ready to.
I think Bronwyn has moved the question.
Well, we don't have to vote on that because it's only 3 of us. But if we're ready for a motion, I move to deny the abatement request.
And to clarify, Bronwyn, it technically is several abatement requests.
All of
So-
them,
And so
the
just as
numbers,
I'm-
whatever to whatever.
So the abatement requests on lot 01R-006 and 01R-006 A through H.
Thank you, Tyler.
I'll second.
All in favor? Favor?
All right, thank you. And with that, we are on to the next item. And I just wanted to flag the certified ratio declaration letter, though I did discover today that technically we cannot take a vote on that letter until April 1 hits. So that letter, just for what it's worth, again, as we mentioned at the last meeting, shows our certified ratio at 53%. We will be certifying at 100 because of that statistical reval, and that'll be on the agenda for the 8th to finally be voted on. And so that concludes assessing items. In the correspondence, I want to just flag a couple of items. The first being that the Spirit of America award ceremony will be on April 17th at 10 a.m. at the county courthouse. All members of the select board, if they're able to make it, are encouraged to attend. And John will be reading our resolution and is already practicing, which is very exciting. And I also wanted to flag that the town of Georgetown has a help wanted notice right now for a deputy town clerk and treasurer. And I would just note that the deputy town clerk, from April 1st through mid-May and during regular business hours, the position would be 2 days a week. from mid-May through town meeting during regular office hours. The position would be 4 days a week. We hope that any applicants would possess good organizational skills, be comfortable with record keeping and numbers, and have strong interpersonal skills. And it's just worth noting that because the race for town clerk, which oversees elections, is contested this year, the applicant who fills this role would be taking on a leading role administering the election. And anybody who's interested in applying should reach out to the town office and we can get folks more information. But I did wanna, I don't normally read as verbatim from our correspondence, but anybody in the audience, anyone on the board, Mike, whoever, please spread the word because this is a need for the town. And I would also note that we received the risk management letter or bulletin from the Maine Municipal Association, as well as their legislative bulletin. The TOP&B recently denied a special activity permit regarding kayaking at the wharf. And we did receive 2 comments from residents, or not residents actually, but folks who wanted to express their thoughts. We also received 3 funding request letters in the last 2 weeks from Tedford Housing, the Community Center, and Oasis Free Clinics. I had no continuing items for everyone tonight, and I would turn this over to select board members for their committee updates.
I had really nothing in mind. Planning board's big thing was they're trying to get their surveys packaged up and mailed, ready to be mailed out. I think that was today.
Perfect. And it is out.
Really?
Wow. It's in the air.
Good
Mike
work.
licked every stamp.
Lisa and Terry was it? Yeah.
All right.
So that's all for me.
Thank you, John. Bronwyn or Aria?
Well, so Solid Waste Committee, much to my disappointment, is apparently not going to bring forward any changes to their ordinance at this time. There was a lot of disagreement, I guess. There was no consensus. Exactly which moves would improve the operations processes that they're worried about. I would also note, though, that I think I have a concern about the level of staffing. We have no backup, and we do have at least one regular employee who has talked to me about the possibility of a leave of absence, or a sabbatical, or is there a way to achieve that? So I'm not sure that our previous thoughts about finding volunteers to substitute, that was really in anticipation of unexpected absences or short-term things, that somebody had a doctor's appointment or a conflict of schedule or something, and that it would be a day that we needed an extra person. But it's that was not I mean, there was no conclusion about that at the meeting. I came away from the meeting with that concern, and I'll bring it back to them at the next meeting. The Conservation Commission has a lot of projects in the works. I guess Big Night is underway. If you're into rain and salamanders, get out there and check out what do they call them? Forget the name of the ponds, but anyway, where they're trying to get to.
Vernal pools.
Say it again.
Vernal pools.
Yes, vernal pools. That's very spring, spring rain, spring pools, spring salamander. Yeah.
It's a word we don't use in construction.
Bad word.
Bad word in construction.
And they have let's see, wait a minute. There's this back on solid waste, there is a hazardous waste day coming up in Bath that we're registered for, and you'll get information. They will get information out. I think there's a flyer going out about that and registering for it. Back to conservation. they have a website which they're maintaining, but questioning its value and just trying to keep it running. It's old and on an old platform that is cumbersome to navigate, I guess I would say. And I think that's it for my report.
Thank you, Bronwyn.
Let's see, there's not been a lot of meetings since our last one, but I've got some regular updates to make, which are that, of course, Get to Know Your Neighbor is on May 4 at the community center. I believe it's 12 to 2, yeah, or 11 to 1. In any event, look for the posters and check out the Georgetown Recs Facebook page. But it's a lunchtime event, and most importantly, our Citizen of the Year will be announced then. The nomination period for that closes on the 27th. And just for those who are wanting to know how that's determined, because people have been asking me, it's the last 5 winners, last 5 years winners make that determination. So please consider nominating somebody who has stepped up in your mind. Yeah, 12 to 2. Thanks, Judy. Who has stepped up to serve the town in the year 2024. The school committee met at the end of, I think about a week ago. And so, and we'll meet again on April 16th. They continue to work on their budget. Rec committee budget is complete, as is Board of Appeals and the Harbor Committee. I think that's it for my update.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Olivia. And if there were no questions, I will quickly jump into my town administrator update and keep it brief. I just wanted to note that nomination papers are still available and you have until April 10 to come in and get them, should you choose to run for an office. The short-term rental questionnaire, as Mike noted, is in the mail. We had estimated a little high on the postage. And so Mary is working to move away the excess cost of stamps from the planning board line back to the town office line. And I can assure you, we will use every one of those stamps. This morning, I spoke with the chair of the county commissioners about a possible groundbreaking ceremony on the emergency communications tower. I know that the county is uncertain if that will happen, though the chair of the commissioners is very excited at the possibility of good news to have. So I will keep folks apprised if that does come to be. I also want to note that last Monday on St. Patrick's Day, I met with the Tedford Shelter to discuss their warming center. And I just wanted to share that it was a good opportunity for me to understand some of the regional resources that are available and make some good connections. And I will say that we've actually used that connection with the Tedford Shelter already to connect a resident with resources, which is exciting. Not directly through them, but they had the contacts we didn't. I would note that we will be having Maine Municipal Association coming down to go over some of the vehicle coverages in the coming weeks at the fire department, making sure that all of the right things are in the right place. And additionally, Alex has registered for the town clerk and tax collector conference in Bangor in May. And we're hoping that should we have a deputy in place by then, which we're very eager to do so, that person could go with her to be exposed to some of the classes and understand that role. And the last bit of news that I just want to share is that to date, no snowplow bids have been received by anyone.
Ooh.
And we have until next week to do so. So I'm not looking at anyone in particular, but I'm hoping that we get some snowplow bids in soon.
I'll get mine into you tomorrow.
Perfect. And,
Wicked lucrative,
and
low hours.
if there were no questions for me, I'd turn this over to Mary.
You good?
Yes, and I'm gonna put the TV back so you can see it, Mary.
Well, that's all right.
So I can see it.
Just a brief update for me tonight. The budget, we are close, but we're still awaiting some numbers from the school, the county, and just a few stragglers. I am talking with the auditors because, as you know, we do not yet have our June 30, 2024 audit. So I'm discussing with them just so that I could get a half decent handle on undesignated fund balance to determine what can be used this year to reduce taxes. I'm thinking about 200,000, but I could be off a little bit. Working on the March financials, but awaiting the bank statements before I can complete them. We will be making the first payment to the state of Maine for the paid family medical leave by April 30, which, as you probably know, is 1% of the wages earned in the previous quarter. We'll be making our last snowplow payment for fiscal year 24-25 next month. And as Tyler just mentioned, have had no bids for the new plow contract. We are in receipt of our completed workers' comp audit, for calendar year 2024 with a bill for $971. So we were a little bit off there. Just for the record, $717 of that has to do with independent contractors. They have, really been after the municipalities to have people covered by workers' comp on their own. And some of ours just simply don't do that. They're independent and they don't have workers' comp. So therefore they tag us for it. So it's been something that's been happening for the past few years. So out of that $971 bill, 717 of it had to do with independent contractors. So, and then today we're in receipt of a letter from the U.S. Department of the Treasury regarding ARPA funding and their desire to have any money not committed by December of 2024 by that deadline returned to them. The letter's bothersome for a couple of different reasons, but the tone of it is a little bit off, and I think it's just the the situation that the federal government's in. I don't believe we're going to have a problem with it at all, but we did just receive that letter today, and it just kind of didn't sit well.
Tyler, can we get it, can y'all distribute a copy to us of that letter? I'd like to
Absolutely.
see it. I was,
Of course.
as you recall, when we first started having these funding concerns, I was a little bit concerned about that. I'm glad you don't think that we're vulnerable, Mary.
Yeah.
But I'd love to see the letter.
For sure. For
Thank
sure.
Well, haven't we spent all the money?
Right. Have we,
Right.
we've committed it for sure.
We've committed all that money. The money has not been spent yet, but it has been committed, which is the current law.
Right.
It had to be committed by December 31 of 2024. I'm sorry, 2024,
Yeah.
and then spent by December 31, 26, I think, right?
Yes.
26,
I think it's
25.
And I also know
Yeah.
that MMA is working with towns on compliance to help make things easier should they run into a hiccup.
Yeah.
Though as Mary said, we, by the letter at least, should be safe for now.
Right.
Cause we've got that, presumably we've got that documented, how, if there was some kind of informal or formal audit by the new, Department of
Right.
Treasury, that we could
Absolutely.
easily
Absolutely.
show them
yes.
it was committed.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
It's just, it's like Treasury is committed to recouping funds used in violation of the SLFRF rules and guidance. It just kind of makes you feel like, wait a second,
Yeah.
So I just, it was
Yeah.
a little problematic.
But my
Yeah.
question is, haven't we done the work? And can't we just spend the money? I mean, we did the work on doors in the antechamber.
Absolutely. The only thing that we've got really left outstanding is the Charles Pond culvert,
Yeah.
which we have allocated, I think it's either $24,000 or $26,000 to do. It's just, we need to get that done, sooner rather than later, to make sure that we're covered that. But that's the only thing I think right
Yeah.
now that's outstanding.
Mhm.
And thankfully, because it's town meeting to do all these dedications, we have all the minutes of the town vote to
Yeah.
show that things were.
Yeah, we had special town meetings to move that around from one
remember.
to the other and all of that, so, yeah.
A fairly well attended special town meeting, if y'all recall.
Right.
last March.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, so, yeah. So, anyway, and
Okay.
that's all I had.
Thanks, Mary.
Any questions for Mary? If not, our last of the updates tonight will come from our code enforcement officer.
Thank you, Tyler. I thought I'd take a minute to just say, update you where we are with the Blueberry Hill septic with the Peterson property. So as a quick recall is that there's a design septic for the property that's owned by the town across the street. But to do that, you have to go across the road, which is privately owned, and then easement to the town property. The easement from Mr. McMahon has been executed and signed. So that part of it is completed, and there's a drawn up easement for the town of Georgetown to be voted on, I understand it, at the town meeting. So that's why nothing has happened, because
Got
it's gonna be on the town warrant, and the townspeople vote to see if they approve that easement or do not approve that easement. But the paperwork, and everything is in order, and it's ready to go, for the meeting. That's,
Great.
Yeah.
Ron's gonna-
Mike, you previously told us that they were eligible for a holding tank.
right, so, I may have misspoke. What I was looking into is holding tanks are allowed in Georgetown because we do have an ordinance and it's outlined, that's what the state requirement is. Unfortunately, I just learned in the class that I can't say whether or not they can have the holding tank. It would require a licensed site evaluator, the folks that design septics and holding tanks and so forth.
So you can just generally say they are permitted
Right,
and there
Whether or
has to
not-
be a specific designation for a property.
correct.
Yeah, got it.
And I do know for what it's worth, Bronwyn and the board is that I've had discussion the last week with Melissa Peterson and her father, Mr. Perkins, I think it's Ken, I forget his first name. And they don't want a holding tank. They really want the septic system.
Right.
So before.
Well, yes, but they want it on our land.
Understood.
And Jonathan said that a holding tank would be part of a septic system.
Well, the holding tank, well, not.
No,
The different types.
Yeah.
It's a.
it's a different tank.
It's a different thing, yes. We've taken holding tanks, drilled holes and made them, if they're big enough and you can make a. What would serve as a baffle. This is technical, but I mean, you can take it one way to make it the other, but the state usually is really hesitant to give a holding tank where there has been some sort of design for a septic field at some point, because there was originally an easement on a different property for just that one house, which apparently fell through. So, that's the kind of thing, where if there was an option, they're really hesitant to okay
Right.
holding tanks in that situation, just from what the stuff I've.
No, I think you're absolutely right, John, that, the state's ideal situation is every place that can have a septic system, right? That's the best way.
Yeah.
Holding tanks is an option. Overboards, I think, are not anymore, by the ones that are present.
Right.
So I think that's what the state likes to see, but.
And so my next question is, did we actually vote to put this on the town warrant to recommend recommend an easement?
So we haven't yet drawn one to do that, and that was gonna be my question next, is the board in a comfortable spot? And if springing the decision on tonight is not the right time, we can wait to a subsequent meeting like the next one or really soon anyway. Cause this select board has not made that decision yet, and I think it would be good to get a straw poll, that way we can kind of know which direction we're headed.
I'm not comfortable with it. Especially not without soliciting input from other residents on Blue Hill Road because of the construction that would be required and the disruption it would make. And I would like, I don't know. It seems to me like it's something that almost deserves a public hearing to get town input about the concept of allowing a private septic system on town property. And there were other issues that were surfacing about tree removal, about who is then responsible. Septic fields generally have to be free of heavy vegetation. Who's responsible for maintaining that appropriately? And do we have any responsibility in making sure that it's pumped out appropriately?
Good point.
Are there any legal questions that we should be asking our attorney?
That makes sense.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing, and I'm agreeing with her, and I think I saw John shake his head, that today is not the day for us to make a decision whether this goes on the warrant.
find out, we got.
It's
some
nice to-
questions, so, yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to know that they're ready to go, Mike, and I appreciate you
Oh, yeah.
letting us know, where they're at in the process that they hope is
And
the
I'll,
option,
I'll review the easements as well to see if they say anything about,
right?
I haven't read them that close, so,
And do you know, they've had an attorney draft these?
yes, Terrio, Bath.
Okay, yeah,
So maybe one possibility would be to have this come, if we did choose to put it on the warrant, have a public discussion as part of the ordinance hearing. Because there's a lot of background, and to expect people to vote at town meeting intelligently on a topic like this, it seems like they might need some of the background facts. That's
makes-
not a motion, it's just a thought.
That is a good thought, Bronwyn, and I'm making a note of it here. So I think as of now, we're not ready for prime time, but we're
Right.
identifying the questions we have to get answered to eventually be at prime time.
and if it's possible, if y'all think it's a good idea, I'd like to see the proposed easement. I'd like to see drafts of the proposed easement. And I think it's important that we share those with the community so that, to Bronwyn's point, people have the most information they can
Absolutely.
have in order to make the most informed decision they can make.
Makes sense?
Yep,
All
yep.
of those pieces, I think, need to be wrapped up, as we approach a decision by the three of us.
And can I just make one comment? Didn't Maloney up there just put in a septic system on this little teeny parcel?
Is that the guy way at the end?
Yeah,
It's designed.
We did.
he's got a design for one, so,
Designed it, yeah.
you know,
Correct.
I mean, I just think, you know, cause
At the end.
you've got him up
There
there
is
at the
one.
very top of the hill.
At the very end, yeah,
Yeah.
we did that, we had a
Right.
holding tank that we, well, it's a holding, or something we did from a holding tank into an actual system, but that's at the very end.
Up past Donovan's.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, all the way.
And then Donovan's got a holding tank, so there's a few different holding tanks on that road. As it
Well, it was, at one point in time, the whole road was approached. And, if they, cause it was a night, idea put forth that they could, do a whole system for the whole lot,
right,
take care of all those problems, but
Right.
there was zero, agreement
Right.
amongst the,
yeah, to
people.
buy that lot right in front of them that
Right.
Bovea wound up buying,
Right.
right,
correct.
right, so, it just seems to me like there's just so much new stuff that you can do. I just, asking to go on town property, and two across the road to go on town property.
That's
And
the
like
first
Bronwyn
thing.
said, that, there's tree issues, there's a whole bunch of different issues there, so.
Along that thought, would it be appropriate as the board is looking for more information to have these homeowners confirm that they can't do it, have that site evaluator look? That way it's very clearly that stone's been turned over and this,
Right, this is the last
Yeah, that was
option.
a while ago. I mean, it was, I can't remember how long ago that thing, that the one Dad was talking about.
Yeah.
Was suggested, but it was a fair amount of time ago. Yeah, it is stuff, just some other things we need to.
yeah.
Consider.
But is that idea, I just wanna make sure, cause as Mike's gonna be talking with the homeowner, do we?
Do
wanna
they
make
have
sure-
documentation already that, a recent documentation from a qualified person that there is no septic system they can put on their own property?
That's my understanding. The design and everything was done before I started. So, well, I should say I don't know, Bronwyn. I just assumed that I don't know how it got to be designed across the street, et cetera.
Well, it's a question to please ask.
Yeah, sure.
And it would, again, it helps inform our decision and whether we move this forward onto the warrant.
Any other thoughts we wanna add, or is Mike out of the hot seat?
That's okay.
And a good way to help them understand is that if they expect, an entire town to vote on this, there's gonna be questions. And we don't want all of that happening, you know,
And,
at town meeting and turn it into a little bit of a free-for-all.
cause there's always the chance at town meeting that somebody could get up and ask,
Yeah.
was this done? And if
Right.
people say no,
Right,
suddenly that sways a room.
exactly.
All right, thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
And so now we're moving into old business on some draft ordinance changes. And the Shellfish Committee has changes to the Shellfish Ordinance. And the question tonight is, do we want to send that on to legal counsel for review or to the public hearing? I would note that the language changes in this ordinance came in from the state, recommending that the language around the free licenses that we give, the complimentary ones rather, to youth and seniors be beefed up. So my take as the administrator would be that this does not need to go to legal counsel because it came from the state.
I agree.
They were just, using some basic boilerplate stuff
Yeah.
because we didn't have the definitions. That was one of the things I did sit in on, that was they weren't there, so it was stuff, one of the state, people was here, and that was just one of the suggestions in looking at some of our stuff that she had, so that, like I said, that was pretty straightforward, so.
I don't think
Okay.
it needs to go to legal. It
Correct,
sounds like you
correct.
don't either, okay.
So we need a
What do you
motion
think?
that,
Yes,
Okay.
to send it to the hearing.
yes.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Look at that, unanimous 3-0. Our next item of new business has already been tackled with a unanimous vote to approve that liquor license. And so now the last business that we'll have before we go into executive session tonight, before public comment, then executive session. I just wanted to touch base on the ordinance public hearing, the budget public hearing and candidates night. So we can start looking at dates, and if we're not ready for dates on any of the options, giving me the criteria of what kind of place to be looking for so we can get dates. And so for what it's worth, the ordinance public hearing is currently slated per the budget memo that went out for May 6th. We did not have a time, a location, and whether or not it's an in-person or hybrid meeting.
I would request that it be hybrid. I'd like to attend. I am at a conference out of town at that time, but I will make this ordinance hearing. And again, my preference would be that we do it around 6 o'clock, like we've been doing some of our public
Okay.
hearings, but only if that works for my colleagues and for y'all.
I'm not sure whether 6 or 7 is a better time for a public hearing, but I agree about hybrid. I think it's important that it be recorded so that people who can't be present can catch up. We could even try to get them to do it right before town meeting, so they don't come in and try to read the changes at the meeting. The same issue would hold true for the budget, that it should be in a situation where people can be present, but also could get the information online and look at it ahead of time before they come to vote on it.
Right.
I'm not sure about, the conference room has such a good setup now that if we feel that we can get enough chairs in a theater style situation coming closer to the table perhaps, or
How many people do we usually have at these? I don't remember. off the top.
What are we
Well,
talking
the
about?
ordinance, start out with just the ordinance, I
Yeah.
guess, start with that
I
one.
think go one by one, and
Yes.
so I think for the ordinance hearing, truthfully, I do not expect that to be well attended because of the number of ordinance revisions we have that are
Right.
minute. However, if we are adding a public hearing that evening about the idea on Blueberry Hill Road, I imagine that will have more people coming out.
Right,
And so,
but still more than what, 20? I mean, you can get 20 people in that space.
We need quite a
You need
crowd in
to-
here for the,
for the
ATV.
Martown Road.
yeah,
Right.
so.
do we think that for the ordinance hearing, we could do that here at town office?
probably.
Sure.
Should I,
But
I think so.
again, hybrid, right?
Yeah.
Are
Yeah,
you-
hybrid,
are we all-
right.
You okay with hybrid?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
so hybrid, is it appropriate for me to also reach out to the Historical Society and see if they have any availability that evening? Or any
I-
of these evenings?
Sure.
No, that's
I think
much
that's a
like
different
room,
question.
sure.
I I would hope that we could do the ordinance hearing
Here,
in the office, in the conference room.
so let's do that.
And
one
I wouldn't
here.
bother the Historical Society over it. And as
Yep.
far as we probably don't want to call it a public hearing. We probably just want to make sure that the Blueberry Hill question is part of what will be on the warrant, so it's being reviewed at that hearing. It's not a
Right.
separate public hearing, right? Even if
Right.
then that's if we decide to propose it, unless we
Right.
want to have a take the temperature of the community meeting, which is probably not going to be well received by the Petersons. They want us to act. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the frog in my throat. But on the public hearing, my recommendation would be town office, hybrid meeting, recorded. I'll defer to you guys on the time, whatever you think.
6 p.m.
I mean, I can't remember if it's been either that or it's either 6 or 7. It doesn't really matter to me. They both, it's,
So I think for the ordinance hearing, we've got a good game plan.
Mhm.
And I will just confirm that we don't have anything else in that room at 6, but why don't we shoot for 6?
okay.
Okay,
And at the next meeting, I will make sure that we have a final of all the dates or the latest. So I think ordinance hearing, we're good. When it comes to the budget hearing, I do think that this office is probably too small
I agree.
if we want to get folks coming out to ask questions, be in close quarters. Again, I think a lot of folks will be participating by Zoom, which is why hybrid's important. And we do have that already slated on May 14th. Would it be
One of the
appropriate-
advantages of Zoom is that you can put the numbers up on the screen, and
Yes,
it makes it much easier for people to follow what's being discussed, as opposed to shifting through a raft of paper and being on the wrong page or the wrong line. But you have to have the screen set up so that the people in the room can also see the screen, right?
would it,
Just
would it-
so with that caveat,
would it be
Historical
appro-
Society.
Would it be appropriate for me to reach out to the Historical Society and see if we could get them for the
Mhm.
evening of the 14th?
I would say, yeah, probably.
I
They've seen,
think
Yeah.
so.
have we done that there before? I just can't remember.
Yes.
It seems like we've done a bunch of the
Yes.
meetings here and it doesn't
We
seem
have.
that bad.
No. it's-
Seems to actually
it's a-
work.
And-
yeah.
And in the event that the Historical Society is committed that night, are we comfortable with moving that date to something in that ballpark?
I am. I don't see anything
Okay.
sacred about the
Perfect.
14th.
I agree.
Perfect. And so the last one is candidates night.
It was
And I-
at 7 o'clock also. Sorry, I wasn't paying
6
attention.
or 7, I don't know, we didn't decide on a time.
I would want to check with their availability
Right.
and see if
Okay.
that might have an impact on volunteers or not. 'Cause
Right.
BD,
you can't be in there without a volunteer, and I don't want to assume we can be
Right.
in, but I know that
well, if it's
Susan.
budget, it's probably gonna be, Terry's gonna be there for
Right.
sure and,
And
I would guess anyway.
right,
He's
So
not on vacation.
I would suggest we defer to what their preference is, whether that's 6 or 7.
Perfect.
wouldn't
I think
wanna
we
go-
I think we should also check with the leaders of the Financial Advisory Committee who generally present the budget. Is that what we anticipate? Or do we anticipate committee chairs speaking to their own budgets?
I would think that the committee chairs would speak to their budgets, because doesn't the FAC make a recommendation based on what the chair has determined?
I think last year I presented the whole budget and then the committee chairs,
We're there for questions.
Yeah,
you
If I
know,
remember right.
support their budget or.
Right.
Right,
you're right,
yes.
yeah,
Or,
Yep.
or answer any questions that
Right.
have to do with their budget.
that's what I'm
Absolutely.
remembering.
Yes,
Mary. Okay,
absolutely, yeah.
okay,
And then remember, of course, too, that we've got the school committee budget,
right.
yeah,
right?
that's a
Which is
different-
usually the day
yeah.
before, or the day after. I can't
It's,
remember.
yeah, I think it's, the last few years, it's been the day before.
Okay, yeah, they're usually on Tuesday and we're on Wednesday or something like
Right.
that, yeah.
But again, I mean, I think obviously we wanna defer to people's schedules,
Right.
we haven't. We don't know everybody's schedule, on the school committee, we don't know Elaine and
Right.
Elaine's schedule or anybody
Yeah.
else's, and
Yeah.
as she said, the other committee chairs.
But I think in terms of location, we've got an idea,
Mm,
and we'll work to what accommodates the multiple parties
right.
Yep.
for budget hearing. And so the last one is candidates night, and I would just state, if we started from the bottom with moderator, I have spoken with Nancy Kinner, and she is eager to do so with us.
Good, okay.
I will say that Nancy Kinner, the week of May fifth, she is out of town. Anytime after that, she'd be willing to work with us. And I do think candidates night, while I continue to just talk too much, should be at the very least hybrid.
Yeah.
Because I do think you wanna get the cross-section of online and not.
Right. Um,
Oh, I think it should
You-
be in the larger space because you have so many contested,
right,
Yeah, this year for sure.
yeah,
and they all will all have their supporters who want to come and, you know, support them. I think it is important to organize the event so that nobody talks too long and questions are polite, friendly in nature. But Nancy is a good person to try to do that. I would suggest that Tyler talk with Nancy about the format, how people who attend are invited to speak. They just stand up and put up their hand and ask their questions, or are we trying to get them to write questions on cards ahead of time and take questions from the chat on to people on Zoom? It was certainly helpful in the last election cycle that Nancy was able to combine some of the questions and restate some of them that were perhaps a little antagonistic.
right.
I'm not confident that people attending in person will want to write their questions ahead, but it would make them more succinct.
And I think Nancy, we leave it up to Nancy to filter any questions that are inappropriate or overly confrontational. We already have a number of contested elections and we don't, I'm not interested in having candidates night become a divisive event for the community.
Right.
I agree with that, yeah. So,
John agrees.
I'm looking to think, if we've got the ordinance the first week, the budget, we've got a meeting. The schools probably has a budget the second week, so we're looking at like the third week.
So that was.
I mean,
Becky's
that's my
Yeah.
next question. I mean, while
I
we're,
think so.
I think,
So.
yeah, we're
because
working from the bottom, I'm going from the top. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
fill up I'm just,
My concern is you're gonna have to, how many candidates do you have to check with? Remember, one year we had I think I had a conflict. And so I said to you, Tyler, don't do it around my schedule, but if I'd like to be there. And so I think you've got 9 or however many candidates to check with to ensure when we start landing on dates, especially for the contested elections, which many of them are. That's in fairness to the candidates along with Nancy. There's a lot for us to consider here.
we're just under a month out on that,
I-
on this third week.
I would say for the third week, to me, makes the most sense, and there were a couple of
Mhm.
days in there. I think having the facility is more important, because I do think that candidates, unless they're traveling and out of state,
Right.
very well could Zoom in.
Oh, sure.
There were a couple of options. I just wanna make sure that we don't have 9 different folks that we can get 7 one day. I'd rather
Absolutely.
set a date.
Right.
Work with the venue, and then have folks make it a priority to be there.
Yeah.
Because you're right, there were a lot of balls to be juggling, and in our attempt to
Yeah.
accommodate everyone, we don't want it to look like.
Yeah, and I would think that we would just do it if somebody was traveling, right?
Right.
Where it was unavoidable. It wasn't that it competed with some other meeting.
Right.
I'm not suggesting that would be the difference.
Cause the
Right.
week after that is Memorial Day weekend.
Right.
So that's,
Right,
And frankly, we're gonna absentee voting
right.
will be kicking off the second mid to second week of May.
Right,
And so if we wait too late,
Mhm.
people will be voting without having a chance to hear from all the candidates too.
well, that'll be their choice, though, I thought
Right.
about that too, like.
Right.
For this municipal election, there's a lot that people wanna consider, and so they could hold it until the day after candidates night.
Right, that's true.
Right, absolutely.
And
yeah.
Tyler, you could ask the Historical Society for, if there's more than, if there's more than one date in that week that would work
Right.
for them. And then poll the candidates and Nancy and pick the one that seems the most favorable. But I do
Yeah.
think that offering Zoom as an option really gives all the candidates an opportunity. It would even be possible if somebody had a direct conflict at the specific time that they could record some kind of a message. They wouldn't then be answering questions, but they would have had an opportunity to speak. Just a thought.
Well, let's hope we don't have to go that route, but it's a good creative solution for somebody who perhaps is on a plane. And
Yeah.
they're the only one.
So in the meantime, ordinance public hearing, we've nailed down, will be here at the town office, recorded hybrid at 6
No,
o'clock.
Okay. Mhm.
And the budget public hearing, we are going to touch base with the historical. I am seeing a note that normally I don't go to the chat, but this one is very relevant to the discussion at hand. Terry, note, Susan and I return to Georgetown May 13th and are leaving the 22nd through the 26th.
No.
We are also not set up at GHS for a large space or Zoom. Susan noted that we will be in the middle of setting up an exhibit which will make the room unusable.
What about the school?
I think that's the next option to look at.
Yeah, the gym.
Yep.
We do town meeting there and we just have to set up the.
Well,
owl.
it doesn't, it is very difficult to do hybrid there, but I think we'll have to try.
Right. Well, we'll have some time to try out the owl. Maybe the owl will make it a little bit more accessible. User friendly.
So Susan and Terry, thank you for that very helpful intel, because I think that helps with this discussion quite so I'll be reaching out to Principal Miller at the school tomorrow and seeing what dates we can work with them on getting the gymnasium.
Mhm.
And if we hit any roadblocks there, we will be in touch very soon.
I mean, yeah, I think the only extracurriculars that are done there are, things like pickleball or yoga or
Right.
our town meetings. So I can't imagine they'd have events at night except for the spring concert, and I think that's June sixth. I think that's June
Yeah.
sixth.
So perfect. Well, I think we've got some good marching orders there, and we will nail this down with final dates, hopefully in your packet for the 8th. That way we can definitely make sure everyone's got ample notice ahead of time, because again, this is gonna be in May and we're just about to start April, so we've
Right.
got a little bit of time. And
Oh, that's right, we got a whole month, I thought it was.
exactly. So with that, I turn this back over to you, John, for public comment. And then we will be having an executive session thereafter.
Okay, is there any public comment? I do not see any. So I guess does that mean we need a motion to go into executive
I
session?
move we enter executive session.
Oh, I get to do that?
I'm gonna hit the door,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Mary,
Okay,
Thanks, Mary.
thank you.
have a good night. Thanks.
So I will make a motion, we enter executive session pursuant to 1 MRS section 405, section 6, section A.
Second,
Second,
All right,
following our discussion, I move that we authorize our personnel liaison, Bronwyn Tudor, to review and draft the appropriate documentation to transition a full-time employee to half-time medical leave status with benefits and pay.
I'll second it.
um,
All in favor, sorry.
No, you're good.
yeah, you
Perfect.
bet.
Thank you so much. And with that, there was no other business, John.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn,
thank you.
Night all.
51.
Have a good night.
Take care, Bron.